a lot of what this country is built on the backs of immigrants,
Right.
both literally, physically, spiritually,
Right.
psychologically. It's built on the backs of brown and black people.
Yeah. What up? It's Dramos, and this is the recap, of course, as I do each and every week, breaking down some of the biggest headlines from this last week. My guest helping me do so on today's show is a singer, songwriter, and producer, my guy, Larito. He'll be hopping on in just a little bit. But first, let me just give a quick PSA before he hops on. Now, listen, 4th of July weekend, Independence Day, and sadly, another tragedy that couldn't be a more accurate representation of the current state of our country. And I'm going to talk more in detail about this with today's guest, but I just want to preface it by saying the dark irony on a day when we're supposed to be celebrating the greatness of this country. Instead, we're seeing its many, many flaws playing out in real time and, unfortunately, taking the lives of innocent people along with it. Gun reform being such a huge issue, and politicians jumping up, when something happens, this won't happen again, we're going to do something about it. They pass a mediocre, yet sadly revolutionary for the time period, gun reform bill, and still look at what happens here. A man who legally purchased a weapon and now used that semi-automatic weapon, that military-grade weapon, to kill and destroy the lives of innocent people just there to enjoy a parade with their families. We have a lot of work to do in this country, and for anybody who questions my critiques of this country, let this be another sad yet glaring example of the work that is still yet to be done in this country. Now, with that said, let me bring on today's guest to break down these headlines. So my guest today is a singer, songwriter, producer whose new single, Really Good Day, is out everywhere right now. My guy, Larito, how you feeling, bro?
Okay, what's up, man? How you feeling? I'm doing great, bro. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course.
Pleasure to be here.
Of course, man. We were talking before we turned on the cameras that man, it's been literally like 3 years since I've seen you. I think we did that in 2019. We did my EP release party, and you performed at that. And I think that was the last time I saw you.
Florida, in the basement,
yes.
Good old times.
Yeah, man. It's been a minute, but it's good to see you, bro. I know you've been doing your thing. I checked out the new video. It's really dope. So we'll get into all of that, man. But if it's cool with you, I want to start with some current events and just kind of get your take a little bit.
Yeah, dude, let's do it.
All right, man. So I want to first start with a reel that I saw on your Instagram when you were dressed up as an alien for the video, because you said, and I quote, "When you've been planning Earth's downfall, but humans already destroying it themselves." And I think this was in reference to Roe v. Wade, which I talked about on the last show. But man, it just feels like it doesn't stop, right? As we're coming off of July 4th weekend here, we have another mass shooting in Illinois.
Right.
You had a 21-year-old dude who's charged in the killing of 7 people at a 4th of July parade. And this guy climbed onto a rooftop and he used a high-powered rifle to shoot dozens of bullets into a parade. And this is in a Chicago suburb. Now, surprise, surprise, he legally purchased the gun that he used for this.
Of course.
And this is despite having received 2 troubling reports about him, and I want to quickly read those. Now, they're saying in April of 2019, someone actually called the police on him saying that he attempted suicide. And then a few months later, officers seized several knives from him after a relative reported that he planned to, quote, kill everyone months after those encounters. And then, what does a person do after that? Well, his father then sponsors this same individual's application for a permit to get guns. And his father co-sponsored a permit that he needed to get 2 guns. He was then approved for that permit, and he then purchased several weapons, which included at least 2 rifles. And they're saying one of those rifles is the one that he used as a murder weapon. It's a semi-automatic Smith & Wesson rifle.
Right.
It feels like every week, man, it doesn't stop. It's another thing that we have to share on Instagram and voice our outrage. I mean, you're a citizen of this country. You're a human being who sees all this, man. I mean, what do you think when you see yet another story? How does it affect you?
I mean, like a lot of this stuff, like you said, it's just crazy, man. It just doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, and I'm not like, I remember like even during like the pandemic, during like 2020, and I used to go like when the whole George Floyd like protest started happening. I was very involved with that. I was very involved with like even like Newark and like the community, and then going just to like, and I kind of it's on my Instagram actually, but I kind of just like took that opportunity to kind of like explore like visually like taking photographs. So I went to like a Patterson one, a Clifton one. I went to the DC protest. That was Martin Luther King Jr. III's like anniversary of his speech.
Yeah.
I Have a Dream speech. And just coming from there up until now, and it just like fit. And we were just talking about it like right now, where it kind of feels like, the last few years have kind of like skipped in a sense.
Yep.
And to me, like the way I think about it, it's just like, I feel like I only remember like those really like those, or at least I try to not remember those really like parts of those 3 years, because it feels like those are the parts that kind of stick out, whether it's like Trump, whether it's mass shootings, whether it's Roe v. Wade or the protests back, 3 years ago. It's just like, it feels like this never ending cycle, or at least it feels like a different version of something that we're kind of like repeating, or it is being repeated, or history kind of repeating itself in a different way. So it's exhausting, man. Like personally, I'm exhausted. Personally, I'm so like, and I'm really trying hard not to, because I think that's the battle. It's just like trying not to be numb to a lot of this stuff that's happening.
Right.
As like, human beings that should care about other human beings' lives. It's kind of one of those things that it happens so often that we don't even get a chance to process what is happening. Right. Because it's happening, like you said, like since 4th of July, there was like one after the other. After, it was like within the same 24 hours. Right. It's a lot, man.
Yeah, it's scary, that we don't even really process it, right? Because myself included, I was on Instagram seeing, the breaking news happening, because of course that's where, we're getting our quickest news source is social media, which is weird in itself. But, it's like one of those things where I compartmentalize, like, okay, this is terrible, but I'll read about it, next week, during the week, right? I don't want to deal with it right now. And I almost feel ashamed saying that, but it's almost like mentally our subconscious is like guarding us from dealing with it in that moment, right? Because how many more of these can you go through, right? You bring up the George Floyd murder, and watching that video was so heartbreaking, and I think that's why you saw the reaction that you did. Everybody was sitting at home and had no choice but to watch that, but then it's like, how many more of these can we sit there and watch and not become numb to it, unfortunately, and it's sad, and it just speaks to how normal this is becoming in our society, and that's just so scary. You know what I mean? Like the fact that we're able to numb ourselves to the fact that people went out to see a parade on July 4th and they were murdered. You know what I mean? It's scary. And then to your point, when you talk about those protests, and I remember you being super active in it, and, we were all talking about it.
Sure.
It's almost like this weird point in time where we thought a lot of change was going to happen because it seemed like people were activated, people were voting and all this. And then it's just like, man, it feels like it's almost gotten worse,
Right. Yeah. No, like, it's like I think around that time it was an awesome time just for like people in general to kind of gather around something, people kind of admitting to being very passive when it came to like, you know, Black Lives Matter or just like gun police shootings with like minority communities and stuff like that. It was a great time for that. But the thing that pisses me off about that entire situation up until now is that we forgot about like a lot of people that I know personally, and even myself. I'm definitely like one of those people who kind of like became so numb, like you said, like I said, where it's almost like a defense mechanism now, where it's like, all right, I'll deal with it when I deal with it, or I just won't deal with it at all because you know a lot of the stuff kind of feels inevitable. But like around that time, you know, friends and everything, everybody was active, everybody was trying to do something, and then it just like time kind of like let everything dissipate little by little, and then like more outrage, more things that we were finding out about, like, you know, Black Lives Matter, people buying like mansions and property and, you know, stuff like that kind of like piss people off. And I understand like other people kind of like losing hope in a sense, and that kind of dissipating since that time. But yeah, man, it's just like how do you like how do you try not to stay numb? Is this like this platform that you use like because I've been trying to kind of figure it out with like my music. It's like you know, I used to be very political with my music, and I'm kind of like just straying away from that just so I don't have to deal with a lot mentally when it comes to the creative process. But like you with like a platform and something I've always wanted to do, like even podcasting and stuff. Is this like a platform that you use to kind of like vent and kind of like let that stuff out and kind of give you more opinions to kind of process it and give you hope? Or is this kind of like your way of playing devil's advocate or something?
I think I mean, I always try and lean on the side of having hope, right? And keeping the faith that things will get better. I think for me, this has definitely become, you know, kind of like it's a necessary evil that I have to do. You know what I mean? Especially when you talk about marginalized communities like ours, you know, people of color, you know, it's necessary to make sure that the information that is important is getting to us in some way, shape, or form, you know? So I've kind of taken on that burden, and, you know, I'd be lying if I said I didn't burn myself out at times. I'd be lying if I said there weren't days where I just didn't feel like doing it, you know, and even in my own personal life, you know, if my girl wants to talk about this stuff, you know, because she's very intellectual and very into politics and societal issues, you know, it's also at times exhausting for me to be able to have the conversation outside of my platform, you know, because I feel like I kind of compartmentalize it almost now, you know. That's like what I was saying when I was, you know, flipping through Instagram. It was almost like, listen, I know I'm going to have to talk about this, so I'm not going to like deal with it right now because I'm going to have to go through it and feel it all over again and read the specifics of it and hear the witnessed, you know, horror stories and all that kind of stuff as a means to give people information and make sure they're up to date on stuff. So it's like I have to attack it when I can attack it and also give myself kind of a balanced break from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it definitely makes a lot of sense. It's like, and I give you props, man, because like, I don't know, like for the last year, I would say I've been very, very, very quiet when it just comes to like world event and current events. It's probably the most I've spoken about it in a long time, but it's just like, it's hard to, like I said, it's hard to process a lot of things. It's hard to give yourself time when you're obviously trying to have like your own life and you're doing your own things. But I think that, I just think people like you, just like people who I know that kind of like, almost inspire me when they're actually doing something good and actually talking about like that actually matters, especially within our community, that you're trying to like do. But yeah, it's a lot, man. It's a lot. I smoke a lot of weed, so it's like, it really helps with everything as much as it possibly can.
I mean, we all got to have our thing to take us away from it, you know? I mean, with that in mind, I'm going to just shift to positive stories for the rest of the show because I feel like it's just been so damn heavy as of late. Now, one of those things, and this doesn't like, you know, this isn't a fix-all, but it is at least a sign of some moving in the right direction. You had this last week, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4, allowing the Biden administration to end the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy. And for anybody not familiar, this was a policy that was first instated in 2019 that required asylum seekers coming to the U.S. to wait in Mexico until their day in court. And this was particularly troubling for anybody seeking asylum because they're obviously escaping really dangerous circumstances in their country. And then to have to wait there for some sort of court date in the future, their lives and their families' lives are still at risk, obviously, in the meantime. and they're saying it's unclear how soon the Biden administration will repeal this, but they're hoping that this will soon start to take effect, and you had the Department of Homeland Security saying that the prior administration's protocols had endemic flaws and imposed unjustified human costs and pulled resources and personnel away from other priority efforts to secure our borders. Now, immigration is a really difficult beast to tackle. Obviously, there's a lot of different things. But I think while again this doesn't solve everything, at least it begins to humanize and take some of that burden away from those who are just searching for a better life.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that I personally understand like the immigrant the struggle, not being an immigrant myself, but like I work with a lot of immigrants and a lot of people, a lot of musicians actually, especially in Newark. I just work with them just as musicians, just coming from like South America, and they're just making their way somehow to Newark and just playing music and figuring out a way to make a living just based off of that, because whatever the situation was in their homeland.
Right.
And I think especially something like this, where it may not be what a lot of people want, as far as like the decision that Biden made, but it's just, like you said, it's a step in the right direction. And I think that we just have to continue that, like, whether it's like something where you're continuing the fight, amongst the community where you don't have to necessarily exploit them, or do it the political way, or do it the more social way, and do it the more communal way, and taking it to the courts and stuff like that. So there's always a way, I always try to find a way to help. I work with a lot of Brazilians, so they're just like some of the dopest people that I know. And I think that they share, there's just similar stories wherever you go, wherever you come from, trying to immigrate into like America, seeking asylum or seeking a better life, seeking stuff like that. They have that similar story. It's just like, it can be a difficult beast to tackle, but I think that I try to look at the more humane part about it and just try to give people like a better life. That's what I care about for that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what this country was founded on, right? And it's just because they're brown, then now it's like frowned upon that they're coming over here, right? But let's be real. You had people escaping the potato famine, and things like that, right? But because they were white, they were accepted with open arms, and because these are brown people of color, there's all types of racial stereotypes that are and connotations that are associated with them, and things that are purposely done to make us seem less human,
exactly,
and that's the problem, and when you install policies like this one, and there's a million other different ones and different ways that they're obviously treated at the border, it's all just a means to dehumanize these people and make it seem like they're here to kind of just freeload off of the backs of what we've what quote unquote Americans have built, and it's just a ridiculous sentiment again that's just like fueled in racism and all kinds of tropes that go along with that.
Exactly. And also the fact that a lot of what this country is built on the backs of immigrants, both literally, physically, spiritually, psychologically. It's built on the backs of brown and black people. And a lot of what this country experiences just as like a culture, because it's a multicultural, just a lovely mixed soup of people. And you have just so many like this is why I just can't understand, and I can't like fathom the idea of coming or being told that America is like a place where it is full of hope, and it's not hope, but like it's filled with like it gives you the idea of the American dream, and that idea is that when you come here, you can make it, But obviously, just like it's almost like I kind of compare it to me going to going to college, coming out of high school, when they tell you, don't worry about financial aid, don't worry about all that stuff. Money's going to come. It's going to pay for itself. You're going to get a great job. While like half the country's in like shambles and unemployment and like people coming out of college and all this stuff. So it's like, and I could understand even like the I guess I don't know what sentiment it is, but I'm going to call it the white power sentiment,
Sure.
where the people are just not like, oh, well, we can take care of this group of people. Why can we take care of our own people? And I'm just like, that to me makes no sense, because you've been helped your entire life, number one. And number two, I don't think it's taking away from anybody that a group of people want a better life in this country.
Right.
While you've had that opportunity, yes, but that's where I fall.
Well, I mean but all that stuff is lies. You know what I mean? Like
stop lying.
Yeah. It's the idea that there's that our resources are being depleted because of immigrants and things like that. It's like, bro, you're sending billions of dollars to the Ukraine at the drop of a hat, right? Like there's money whenever you want there to be money. And if you cared so much about Americans, then why are places like Flint, Michigan still without clean drinking water? You know what I mean?
For years,
right? Like it's all just hypocrisies of like this idea of American patriotism, but it's all propaganda. If there's one thing America is great at, it's marketing. You know what I mean? America has a great PR team. It's all this like American propaganda that we're pushing that really doesn't mean much at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It doesn't actually have much meat on the bone when you really break it down.
It's just strange, man. It's just like, it's a strange thing to live in a country where everything that it says it is, it's not. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that as time goes on and as more things start popping up.
Right.
Especially now, it's like it's very hard to be an American right now. Like it's super hard. And I just came back from Sweden, and it's an interesting thing to see how other people view America, because they're viewing it from a very small lens, because we're not given the same. Actually, we are. It's social media is different, because social media you can follow people from throughout the world, but as far as like propagandic news, national media, different things are being told. So it's very interesting when I see people like, oh my God, you're from New York? Oh, I want to go to New York so bad. I was just like, it's beautiful there and da-da-da. And I'm just like, man, let me tell you, you go to New York, it's going to smell like piss. And it's like, Sweden smells beautiful. It smells clean. It's like you go on Newark Airport and you get off the plane in Stockholm, and it's just like fresh air. And when you get back, it's like, the difference is, you could tell.
Right.
But the point is that I think the world's view of America is not great right now. And it hasn't been for a very long time. And we keep pushing the narrative that we're the
right.
And I can admit that we're not. I'll tell anybody in the world, we ain't.
Yeah.
There's people. There are a select group of people that are, but the small percentage of our government and whoever runs this country and whatever it is, it's like, it's all trash at this point.
Yeah,
you know?
And it's funny because those statements that you're saying, the other side would say you're being unpatriotic, but it's like, bro,
but you're also storming the Capitol. What do you mean?
Right. But that's
out my face.
Exactly. It doesn't add up. Like the math doesn't add up, and it's like, you're gonna ride the patriotism into the ground, basically, right? You're gonna ride this idea of I love America so much, it's the greatest place on earth, until it dwindles away into a shell of what it was supposed to be, right?
Exactly.
And that's just a sad thing of people not wanting to face reality. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is in Puerto Rico. Both of us are Puerto Rican. So this touches close to home. I know you've probably been seeing a bunch of the protests that have been going on throughout Puerto Rico, be it the gentrification, be it the beaches, being built on and privatized, even though it's illegal, by Puerto Rican laws. So you had in Rincon, and this is after a year of protesting and occupying the beach, you had environmental justice activists destroying parts of an illegal construction, a condominium that was being built on the beach in Rincon. And last year, basically, the foundation of all of this is that last year, an environmental group of justice activists found that sea turtles that are endangered were laying their eggs on this beach, and that the condominium was actually building a pool right on that same area. And this heightened all sorts of news media outlets to cover it, because the protests broke out because they found out that the condo developers did not actually do an environmental research that they were supposed to on this before building. The permits were given illegally, and it actually went all the way up to the Supreme Court. and it ruled that they had 120 days to destroy this condo. And of course, they ended up not destroying it, people protesting, and now you had protesters actually taking it upon themselves over the weekend to begin destroying the condominium themselves. And the irony is here you have this corruption, because it's sadly happening everywhere, where not to point fingers, but the governor of Puerto Rico, apparently his brother has an apartment in this condominium. Which many point to that might be the reason why it took so long for them to handle this. You had police resistance at first to people were getting arrested for merely protesting on this thing, and it was said behind closed doors, protesters hearing the police say, we're illegally arresting these people, we shouldn't be doing this. And then eventually they had no choice but to allow people to start destroying this, and it seems like now the ball is rolling on all of this. But personally, as a Puerto Rican, things like this scare me, because it seems like more and more of our culture is being stripped away to big money, right? To the person with the highest bid, essentially, and I've talked about this a lot when you look at a place like Hawaii, where the locals from Hawaii are being priced out of their own land. You have stories of the people who work at these hotels, the locals who work at these hotels, some of whom have to sleep in their own car because they can't actually afford to live in the area where they work. I mean, you hear these stories about everything going on in Puerto Rico. I'm sure you have ties to the island as well. I mean, I'd love to hear kind of your perspective.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, like, ever since Hurricane Maria, really, that's kind of like, because I remember I was very involved with Hurricane Maria because I had been in contact with the church out there in Carolina, and just contacting through Facebook and trying to get like supplies out there, doing like charity stuff for them, and I think I even went there like before the pandemic, like 2019, like the summer and stuff. Even visiting, like, you still go to those places where Hurricane Maria so hit. I didn't even go to the west side of the island.
Right.
I think they got it the worst.
Yeah.
And just like the fact that there are still like rubble and people's houses destroyed and communities destroyed, and then its own government letting billionaires buy property.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is, right? It's really just about trying to own as much property as possible.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what they try to do to Cuba and kind of turn it into like a tourist attraction, resort, casinos, and all this stuff. And it's kind of what's happening to Puerto Rico. It's being turned into a gentrified island, and also becoming a tax haven for billionaires to buy property and not pay property taxes or any tax.
Yeah.
And like, cause, like who was the guys the brothers, they do that shit.
The Paul brothers, Logan Paul.
Paul, Logan Paul. They're doing the same thing over there as well.
Right.
So it's very hard to, it's very hard to like comprehend that it's even actually that's happening, because I have family there and they've been there for years and years and years, and they've seen. It's kind of crazy too, because they see a decline with Puerto Rico, but then it's like we're being shown like the island of Puerto Rico and the Bad Bunny and people putting whatever they put on Instagram and Yunque, La Placita, and like Puerto Rico, reggaeton. That's what all people see. Right. But once they go to the island, either they don't care or it's like really fucked up. Like it's so. My mom talks about it all the time. She has like all her family that's still over there. They always talk about it. And it's weird because they don't even, they'll talk about like shit is bad over there, but they won't never admit to it being like that bad where they can't like, live and survive and have like a life over there, Right. Even though I know like they kind of like secretly want to, but it's like they don't have any place else to go. Sure. So it's like they kind of have to be, and it's fucked up to even say, but they kind of have to be very, what's the word? Complacent with everything that's going on, just so they can have a life.
Right.
So it's tough. It's tough to watch it, especially like I'm New Yorican, but all my most of my family's from there. I didn't grow up in Puerto Rico, but I feel like just through creativity, through music, and just learning about culture, you like I'm sure you relate to the same thing. It's just like once you find out about like your ancestors and everything that Puerto Rico is actually about, you grow attached to it. You grow very like it's like that's like your heart. That's and for me, it's like, it's heartbreaking. So I try to keep it alive in my own way.
Yeah.
And I hopefully it gets better. I really do. I really hope. But
yeah. I mean, well, the thing that gives me hope to a degree is stories like this, when it's the younger generation who is now taking into their own hands to protest and be incredibly vocal, right? And definitely, the older generation has kind of put their hands up and said, this is life and it is what it is, right?
Right.
And that's sort of the sad thing, but like I said, I think you are seeing it with this younger generation where at least they're showing the willingness to fight, which I think is a beautiful thing. But
absolutely.
But the tough part is, their own government isn't concerned with protecting them, right? Isn't concerned with protecting the people of there. They're not the priority, right? They want to bring in these high-end investors. They want to bring in, high-end vacationers and then people living on the island, like you said, the tax haven that it is meant to bring in these wealthy people that essentially don't want to actually interact with the local aspect of Puerto Rico, right? They have these places in Dorado, which is, if I'm not mistaken, where the Logan Paul has his house, where there are these gated communities that have their own grocery stores, their own restaurants. They don't need to leave the resort essentially and interact with the local community. Exactly. So with that kind of stuff, they're pricing out the people of Puerto Rico. And to your point, when it comes to Maria, you had a lot of people that were forced to abandon their homes because there was nothing left, essentially, right? And then
my family,
what does that set up? You see investors come in. Oh, I can buy this property in Paradise essentially for $10,000, and then just invest, $50,000, $60,000, and turn it into an Airbnb. And that's what they're doing, and then what happens is the locals have nowhere to live now. They can't rent, they can't afford to rent in Puerto Rico in a decent area, or they can't afford to buy a house. I mean, I've been looking at property down there, and my family has, and like the competition level down there is insane. They're talking about, $200,000 houses, and they're only accepting cash offers. Well, who the hell can just easily throw out $200,000 like that, right? It's not going to be the locals down there who are already making, salaries that are beneath them. It's going to be rich people from out here, rich white people who are going to come and take away the culture inevitably if they, enough of them move out there, essentially.
Yeah. And I and it's hard to like comprehend people who don't even view Puerto Rico as and I think that's the issue, right? They don't view Puerto Rico as like a state or a part of America, when Puerto Ricans influence so much of East and the West Coast, South, all throughout the country, as do like many cultures and stuff. But like Puerto Rico specifically is that one place that everybody will go to, but they will not consider it a part of the United States, because they'll say, oh, it's territory, oh, it's Commonwealth, whatever you want to call it. But it's a territory. It's like Guam. It's like, it's like, and
these are American citizens at the end of the day. Like, it doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Like, but they don't have the representation, right? The same representation that we went to war for, in the Revolutionary War. Puerto Ricans are being faced with the same thing. They can't vote for president, but they can be drafted into fighting for the war, right? And Puerto Ricans don't pay the same taxes we pay here, but they do contribute to certain things, like 401ks and things of that nature.
Right.
So it's again, it's taxation without representation, which is what this country was founded upon. But the irony is people don't want to, support these people in the same way, which we saw with the delayed help when it came to Maria. It was the locals that rebuilt their island for themselves, and the U.S. Was withholding those funds.
Yeah, and it was the locals who also found those warehouses throughout the island that they were keeping in food and keeping it away from the people, because that's what essentially controls the people. It's, food and water when they don't have it.
Right. Right. Well, even when you talk, like, I was reading this book, and it's something crazy. It's like 90-something% of all the food in Puerto Rico is imported. And that's because of like the way that, U.S. has it set up that like the ports and the food and anything shipped has to hit a U.S. port first, then go to the island, right? So what happens? Things become more expensive because the taxes get added on now instead of it going directly to the people. And the U.S. wants to, make their money by having their goods brought into the island rather than Puerto Rico, creating its own goods, So it's just this vicious cycle that is hurting the people, over and over again.
Because they know if Puerto Rico was able to access, like, if they became its own independent, like, state or country or whatever, their ability to import and export throughout the world, they call they didn't take over that island for no reason. They didn't colonize this island for no reason. They knew what they were doing because they know that was support between the West and the East of the Earth. And so it's like, yeah, it's a business thing. It's a money grab. America knows if they lose that territory, they lose a lot of money. And at the end of the day, all this is just about how much money are you going to lose and how much it's all about.
Oh, it always comes down to money and power at the end of the day, man.
Exactly.
So last thing I wanna talk about is, I know you just dropped the video for your single "Really Good Day." I checked it out. Really dope, really creative.
Thank you, man.
You are made up as an alien and running around the streets of New York, which I thought was super dope. I mean, let's talk about this because it's I think you've been challenging yourself, which I've always appreciated, to make different kinds of records, right? I think you started out with a more traditional Latin sound in some of the records, and then now you're doing this fusion of like Spanglish lyrics, and then this one almost has like some drum and bass type of feels to it, which is really dope. So I mean, let's kind of just talk about first and foremost the vibe of Really Good Day and creating it.
Yeah, so Really Good Day was I forgot the name of the song, but it's a Drake song, but it's one where he has like the tambourine. I forgot the name of the damn song, but it was inspired by that, and it's gonna bother me now that I can't remember the name of the song. I'll tell you later. But I was inspired by that song, and I saw that it had like a drum and bass kind of like feel to it, like you pointed out, and I really, with me, it's like you're right. I went from like the traditional Latin stuff, and I kind of was trying to do more experimentation and trying to explore more stuff, and I feel like through going through that whole process, I'm learning like my sound more. I kind of thought I figured out my sound, but I felt like, oh, there's this whole other like, other thing that I can do with my music that that for me personally, I want to listen to first. And I also, in a sense, kind of want to like, I don't want to be stereotyped. And I work with a company right now called Epidemic Sound, and they help me with like the distributing like my music, and like we kind of have like a partnership together where we're helping each other pretty much release and brand myself as an artist. And they allow me to experiment a lot, which is something I've never had like the opportunity to do. And go all out. So I've been trying just a bunch of different things and trying not to be necessarily stereotyped to a Puerto Rican Latin artist who only does Spanish and reggaeton and urban Latino music. And I think my goal right now is how can I take this style that I kind of like developed and kind of learning from like Puerto Rico or from New York, and kind of like taking into other genres like drum and bass, or like I did like a K-pop record that I was speaking Spanish, Korean, and English, and it was weird, but it was cool, and it's out now. But it all came and it all kind of like circled back to something like Really Good Day, which was just another example of me just trying to like do something that clearly not everybody else is doing, and to just do something that I want to hear. Really, at the end of the day, it was really just something I wanted to listen to it because I've never heard it before. So it was cool to do it.
That's usually when like the best stuff happens. When you're just creating the records that you want to hear.
Exactly.
That's usually when it's it kind of ends up being some of your best work. I mean, I think it's dope though because obviously there is a notion of what Latin music is, right? But I also think there's a really incredibly underrated alternative Latin scene, that is kind of bubbling up right now, and I think there's something really, really dope about it. I mean, there's a number of artists, like I feel like I just randomly run through like a lot of really cool independent artists on Spotify through random alternative playlists and stuff like that. But even somebody like Danny Ocean's having a really big moment right now, and he's doing like a rock Latin sound. Raul Alejandro, obviously, he does some of the typical stuff, but also experiments a bit more than a lot of artists. And then obviously even Bad Bunny on this new one has experimented with certain things and has features from acts like the Marias and people like that who exist in more of that alternative world. So exactly. I was gonna say, I mean, I think that there's really something bubbling up right now that is really dope with like the Latin alternative scene, and like is gonna bring a new flavor to like a genre of music that's been pretty stale for a long time.
Yeah, and I completely agree, because I think what trap and drill is to America, or just parts of America, is what Latin music is what reggaeton is to like most Latin countries and,
Sure.
you know, throughout the world. So, so it's, I see it too. And I think it's interesting. And I think it kind of like started around when I started listening to like, I mean, there was other people like, you know, there's, I love, the songwriter Natalia Lafourcade. She's a Mexican songwriter. And like, you know, people like that, or Daniel No Me Estás Matando, which is another kind of like, they call themselves like indie or bolero glam. That's what they call it.
Sure.
And it's like that stuff I'm drawn to that stuff so much. And the thing that Spanish music and Latin music is always going to have in common most of the time is it's going to be about love. It's going to have romance, and it's going to have those aspects of the music. So I think, you know, listening to that music over and over again with reggaeton, I kind of got bored of it. I'm kind of tired of it. I could do it. But it's like, all right, I feel like this has been like since 1995 or, you know, like, you know, so it's like, where else can we take this? And I think like Bad Bunny, for example, he's just an amazing example of like what you can do with your voice and putting it on something that you've never done before and making it shit sound fire.
Right.
Raul Alejandro is the same way. When I heard Desenfocado for the first time, it's like this upbeat, like, you know, like electronic, like pop joint, but he had that Puerto Rican like slang and
right.
I love that. So a lot of that stuff I'm very inspired from, and you're gonna see like in a lot of the future stuff that I do. Like next year, I'm working on it for an album that'll have Un Verano Sin Ti vibes, but with like, you know, I'm trying to like take it and very experiment a lot with like those sounds, like drum and bass, like that.
Love it.
So yeah, I love the direction, and I love the notoriety that Latin music is getting now.
Yeah.
Way more than ever.
Yeah.
You know, so people are catching on, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Last thing I'll say is literally I've taken a break from DJing, but I DJ'd a couple times last month, and it's Bad Bunny and then throwbacks, and that just shows you where the current climate is, that like music, at least American music, has gotten so stale that even younger kids are like people in their 20s are wanting songs from before they were even alive to really hear them, you know, on the radio. And then on the other side of that, Bad Bunny is the only like new thing that is just crushing, you know, in the clubs right now. So it just shows.
Who thought anybody would be listening to K Bush?
Right, exactly. That just shows you the drought that like English music has right now, and then just shows you the power of Bad Bunny and a lot of these other artists that we're talking about, because they're the actual people pushing, you know, what it means to make great music in this time period right now. So I just think, to your point, Latin music right now is so interesting, and it's getting finally the notoriety it deserves, because it's truly, you know, bending genres and pushing, you know, what it means to make popular music these days, you know.
Exactly.
And all right, man, I appreciate you. It's good to see you. Let people know, where can they follow you, where can they check out the new music, let them know what you got coming up.
So you guys can find me my Instagram at Laudito, all the Twitter handles, Facebook, all that stuff at Laudito, LAWDITO. Just released a new music video, Really Good Day. It's on YouTube. It's available. Just go to lauditomusic.com and everything will be there, all the information. And yeah, man, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It was really, really awesome, like catching up with you and just like talking with you. You're a cool dude, so I appreciate that.
Appreciate you, my bro. Always good seeing you. Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Laudito. Make sure you go check out his new single, Really Good Day. It is out everywhere you find music, everywhere you stream, as well as YouTube. I highly suggest checking out the video. Really, really dope concept for it. I really enjoyed it. I think it really brings the song to life, so I highly recommend that. Now, with that in mind, let's leave on some positivity, and it's going to be completely unrelated to anything we've been talking about. Let's just kind of, you know, wash ourselves and cleanse ourselves with a positive quote and a reminder that I think is incredibly important for all of us as we go through our daily lives. Now, today's quote comes to us from my guy, Humble the Poet, and he says, "Don't take it personally. That's just how life works sometimes." And I think this could be applied to any situation in our lives. And again, this doesn't really have anything particular to do with what we were talking about on today's show, but I think it's a healthy reminder, because I know, myself included, it is easy to get really down during the dark periods of our lives and to feel like, life has it out for us. God has it out for us. The universe, whatever it is that you believe in, when you're going through one of those dark, stormy periods in your life where nothing seems to be working, it is very easy to feel like you are being personally attacked by universe, by gods, by some sort of, innate being out there that doesn't want to see you succeed. And you just have to remember that life has plans. There are greater forces at work, and there are going to be ebbs and flows in this thing we call life. There are going to be times when the water is calm and everything is sunny and happy, and there are going to be times when the water is choppy and waves are crashing down, and you just have to hang on for dear life to survive. And that's just a part of life. But at the end of the day, it's all necessary parts of life, and it's just something to keep in mind if you are going through a tough particular phase in your life right now, or to keep in the back of your head in case that happens at some point down the road, as it inevitably will for all of us. Remember, this is nothing personal. Life just deals us a crappy hand sometimes, and we just have to do our best to move forward and to move on from it. Now, with that in mind, thank y'all so much for tuning into this week's episode. I'll catch y'all next time with a brand new one. Till then, stay safe, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.